I recently got an email from a creator who has built his business around creating large format figures. And instead of just featuring his work, I wanted to really understand how he does it. So in this video, you're going to see an interview that I had with him where we break down his process, how he prices things, and just his journey along building this business. If you're like me right now trying to learn how to make your own 3D models and you're going to do that in your business, then stay tuned because I think that this will be really helpful for you. Hi, my name is Ashley and I have built a six-figure bakery from my home. Now I'm taking the strategies I used to build that business to build my 3D printing business, but taking you along with me so that you too can build a business. Let's get into it.
Brendan, thank you so much for joining me today on Design Forge Studios, Print to Profit. I'm really glad that you reached out because I have been talking a lot lately about designing my own models, and you are somebody who does design your own models. So, when you are originally creating your models, what are you thinking about from the beginning to make sure that it's actually going to print and it's not an awful thing to make?
Oh yeah, Ashley, and thank you for having me on. I've actually been following your designing journey on your channel, so it's been really exciting to see that going on. And I'd say, honestly, whenever I start designing a new model, the first thing I'm looking to do is just get a minimum viable product out. I think a lot of people tend to obsess about the details, reduce material costs right off the bat, and they never really get something tangible in their hand that works. So when I'm starting one of my new megafigs, I'll just look just to get something down out of the printer. We could be talking maybe $5 or $6 of cost. And so that's really one of the benefits of 3D printing, as I see it, is you can make mistakes. Mistakes are cheap in 3D printing unless you start talking printing huge items, which I don't do right now. But I think I try to leverage that and get stuff printed to get momentum. And so I think that's really what's been the most important thing for my designing journey is I'm a lousy designer personally. I'm an amateur. I've only been designing for 3 years and I'm barely at that. And I think, hey, if I can just get something out in my hands and see what's wrong or get it on the printer, and yeah, maybe the print fails because I didn't design it with supports in mind, but at least I now know that, and that's knowledge I've learned rather than obsessing over every detail for days and then it goes wrong. And it's something I could have avoided if I just did a small test print. And but aside from that, after the first iteration, I will tend to look into, so hey, can I reduce supports by putting in less overhangs, by adjusting certain curves or certain angles to reduce the need for supports that doesn't significantly affect the quality or the overall function of what I'm designing. Other than that, honestly, I tend to prioritize quality over any other design factor, other over cost, over print time even. A lot of people probably look at my print times on my megafigs and probably their jaws would drop. And it's one of those things that in the market and the craft fairs and the shows I go to, I've just went for the full high quality, most detailed designs that I can get and try to figure out how to optimize or get more printers to shore up the back end. So that's been fun.
Mhm. I think you said a lot of really important things in there because, especially, I think somebody who's trying to teach themselves how to design and how to print things, like getting something that you have successfully created, no matter how basic or whatever it is, I think that's amazing just to be like, oh my gosh, I did this, right? And then it encourages you to keep going. So just getting that print out and then tweaking it afterwards. And so many times, I think, as 3D printers, right, we'll all go to different markets and events and we'll look at other people's products and you're like, what are your layer lines like? Right. And you can tell if somebody is selling something for way under price and you look at it, you could tell it's not very good quality. And it's because they care more about the time than they do the quality of the print, right? So I do think it's really important that we're actually going for quality of the print because that's what's going to set you apart from everybody else who's really trying to underprice and undercut everybody in the market. Is if your prints look good, right, and they're going to be sturdy and last, that's what's going to withhold your business in the long run because your product is so much better than everybody else around you.
And even more to that too, I think I found, of course, I'm trying to make money just like the rest of everybody else. But I've found that I think there's a little bit of hesitation in the marketplace from customers when it comes to 3D printed products. And I think a lot of times maybe they seem cheap or they seem easy to break or low quality. And I think that personally, I think that's a reputation that 3D printed products have kind of gained over the years. And so I'm hopefully the market starts shifting and designers I want to encourage them to start putting out high quality products. And I think I found customers are willing to pay a little more of a price for a higher quality multicolor product. And I think there are some other creators out there that are finding that too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I've had people reach out to me actually, and they said, I bought this from a different market and it broke really quick. Yours, when I looked at your items, they looked way better. Do you have something similar? Because my kid is devastated now that their dragon is broken. So I totally agree. There is that stigma in 3D printing because you have people who are compromising quality in order to make things speed up and print faster. And things are breaking, and then it's giving everybody else a bad reputation. So yeah, for me, I just try to build that reputation up with my customers. I can't control what everybody else is doing. None of
Right.
us can. But if we have a good base that we're building and they know that our products are good quality, then they'll keep coming back to us.
Yeah, that's true. And
Right.
honestly, I think that's one of the most important things about design work, about running a small business is repeat customers. I've had a couple of customers that they track me down and they buy multiple different items from me and they tell their friends, tell their family. And I think that's where you see the return on investment when you put in time to make something quality.
Yeah, I can say that as somebody who has run my bakery for 6 years, right? Most of my customers are repeat customers. Many of them I have had from the very beginning, and they come to me for every anniversary or baby shower, or I've been making kids' birthday cakes for 5, 6 years now. But it's the repeat customers are what will keep your business going, right? A one off customer is never going to help you to be able to grow that business. You got to nurture your customers, and then they're going to stick around for you. So then with that, like how do you decide what details are worth keeping, maybe what you want to simplify more so that your model looks great, but also it makes sense for you from a time and profit standpoint?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably really at the top of most designers' mind. Honestly, I just let the limitations of the printer decide which details to include. I typically almost always print in a 0.4 millimeter nozzle just because I found that's a good balance between speed and detail. I found that a 0.2 millimeter nozzle is a little bit overkill when it comes to FDM printing. And so that kind of basically sets the lower limit on the XY plane detail that I try to include in my designs. And then really when it comes to color, I'm limited just by the number of AMS units I have. I'm really mostly just running 2 AMS units on my P1 printers, so I just limit my designs to 8 colors for the time being. Other than that, I try to put as much detail in my models as possible. I guess I'm fortunate that a lot of Lego product is very tailored. It has a color scheme that's usually 4 or 5 colors, and there aren't gradients and colors like that really shines in 3D printing. But I think it's also a good case study for other products to say, hey, how can we leverage the fact that 3D printing can't do blending, it can't do full color, you have to work within a certain number of colors.
Awesome. And with that, we should take a moment just for you to explain what it is exactly that you designed, because I did not touch on that in the beginning. So if you just want to tell everybody what products it is that you designed, that would be great.
Oh yeah. So my real flagship and main focus on my product right now is a product I call megapigs. They're Lego inspired 8-inch tall Lego minifigures. So here's one of my most popular megapigs. This is a Sheriff Deadpool figure. And there's a regular Lego minifigure for scale. And so they're articulating. And right now I think I have 50 different designs. And so that's one of them, adding the accessories and stuff. And as you can see, as I was talking about, every detail, the mustache, the holster, stuff like that, yeah, is it 100% necessary? No, but I think it's just that extra little bit of detail that customers tend to really go wild for. And so let me show you another one here. One of my favorites. I got Iron Man here. And Iron Man actually presented a unique challenge in that when scaling up to the 8-inch size, the visor didn't want to stay attached. And
Okay.
so I decided to use hardware and use screws to keep it on there and still make it opening because I could have made it just one solid piece, but I think, and now I know after selling dozens of them, that customers really enjoy the visor opening. It seems like such a simple detail, but it's that X factor that you go that little distance to put the screws in and it makes a big difference.
I agree, because I think not many people are going to offer a model like that where you get that option of the mask opening up.
Yeah. And one thing I've actually found when looking at some competitors with 3D printed products is that I think a lot of people are very hesitant to put any hardware or post processing into their 3D printed products. And while I understand it's time consuming, even just putting screws in this is added time to each unit, even if it's only a minute or two. And that's or assembly, right? I assemble all of these units, and so I print the parts individually so they articulate. Even just assembly time can be time consuming, but it's added value that sets you apart from the
Yeah.
competition. And so I find customers really appreciate that added value.
Yep, I totally agree with that. And what is it that made you go towards these in the first place?
Funny enough, right after I got my first 3D printer, so about 3 years ago, I happen to really like Lego, and so I took my little brother to a Lego convention in our hometown, and I was walking around, and at the time I didn't really know. I knew I wanted to do something, a small business related to 3D printing, but I didn't. At the time, I didn't really know what it was going to be, and I had tried a couple of things on Etsy, and they really flopped. But it dawned on me, and I said at this convention, I said, "Why is there nothing 3D printed at this Lego convention? It seems like the perfect opportunity for 3D printed products at the time." And so then I was browsing around on Bamboo Studio, Bamboo Handy, and I saw someone else had made one of these similar to these. And I said, you know what? I think I can make that better. And it took me a few months to get to the better portion, and then here we are.
So, how did you figure out how to price these? Because that is probably one of the questions that I get the most on my channel is how do you figure out pricing? And I give people an idea, but I think it's really important that they can hear from other people's perspectives too. So, how do you figure out how to price them and what are some of the costs that maybe people don't think about when they're pricing out models?
I think actually pricing is probably I found one of the hardest aspects when you're creating models to sell, when you're creating physical products to sell. And I've really taken two different approaches to pricing. When I first started, I got pretty lucky that there's a lot of Lego related product out there. And so I looked for items that were similar to my product. Maybe not identical because there really wasn't anything identical, but for me, I looked at Lego minifigures and I said, okay, hey, what are the customers willing to pay for a Lego minifigure? And then extrapolated from that, hey, this is a bigger item. This is what I relatively think the market might be willing to pay. Ironically, I actually, after my first event, realized that I had my product price a little bit too low. And so it's something that I personally encourage people to start low on their pricing, just because I think if your pricing is high and then nobody buys your product, it can be discouraging. It could be a great product, it could be better than sliced bread, but then if your pricing's too high and nobody wants to pay that amount of money, you may write it off or set it aside and miss a huge opportunity. And then I think the other approach, if you maybe can't find anything that's similar to your product, I would say is I'd start from a total cost perspective in the item, material cost, electricity, printers, whatever aspects you take into account, labor. I take a little bit of a different approach to labor when it comes to a small business that I'm running by myself. When I started, I actually tend to value my labor at the initially near zero. Um,
Okay.
just because I think that's a trap a lot of people get into when they're starting their small business is because a lot of us have jobs or have skills and we have a salary and we expect to make that salary necessarily. And I found myself almost falling into that trap when I started and thinking, yeah, this is very valuable. I'm putting a lot of my time into this. People should want to pay a lot of money for this thing. And then it turns out they didn't want to pay that much. So
Yeah.
I think that might be one of why some of my first products failed is because I priced them way too high and then I moved on. And then I recommend looking at maybe I want to make 40% gross profit margin on my item, which is usually a pretty handsome gross profit
Hmm.
margin when you're
Yep.
talking selling products. 40% return on investment is not too bad. And so I think that can be a more grounded perspective and it gives you some good reasoning as to how you arrive at your pricing if there's no other benchmark.
Yeah. And now do you feel like you've arrived at a good spot where you're making good money and it's a good price point for people?
Yeah, I definitely do. And my brother and my mom and some people have told me, they say, oh, you should raise your prices a little bit. And I say, honestly, I think we're selling a decent amount. I'm happy with the margins. And I routinely get customers who come up to me telling me that the price on my products is great. And I think that's really the optimal place you want to be in is your customers feel like they're getting a deal. They think your product is underpriced, really is what they're telling me and I feel like I'm winning and I'm coming out with a decent with an acceptable and a profit margin. I really think of the Arizona tea guy when I think about pricing and how
Yeah.
he kept his teas at 99 cents for so long, and people kept asking him why he was doing that, and he said, "Because I'm happy with the money I'm making."
I agree with that. If you're at a good spot where you are making a good profit and you're happy with it, and your customers obviously are coming back, so they're happy with your prices. If your costs aren't going up, then you don't necessarily need to raise those prices if nothing else is changing and everybody is at a good spot.
Right. Yeah. And also, speaking of pricing, lately I've been looking at diversifying my products. And I told my brother, I said, I'm looking at items that have a larger ticket value. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that can maybe be a trap that a lot of 3D printing companies fall into, is I think we end up kind of focusing on small items that have a low upfront cost because they're necessarily less risky. But overall, you're selling a $5 item. How many of those items do you have to sell to make a decent living to support
Yeah.
yourself on and then go full time versus maybe you're selling a $40 or $50 item. And personally, I've been making that switch, and I encourage people to look at, say, hey, what are things that people would like and be happy to pay $50 for? It's
Yeah.
very, because it's pretty rewarding. Your profit margins may be a little smaller on the percentage wise, but over on a gross dollar amount, I think it's nice to be in double digits rather than single digits.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. So if there was somebody who wanted to start making and selling their own 3D models, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you think that they should avoid?
Oh man, I'd say that one of the biggest mistakes, I think I touched on it at the beginning, but I think it's hands down the biggest mistake people make is talking about an idea, planning an idea, designing something forever, and never actually doing anything with it. I think this applies to all business, but I think especially 3D printing is you have something that's cool and you're working on it and you keep working on it, keep planning it, and you never really try it out. Of course, I think it can be discouraging to go to a craft fair with your item that maybe you know isn't the best that it could be, and it doesn't really sell, but at least you got something out there. At least you tried it out. Maybe you get some feedback from people because people are more than happy to tell you feedback. I found that, and I'll solicit customers for new character ideas and say, "Hey, what do you think? What's missing? What should I work on next?" And they're
Yeah.
more than happy to give it to me at no charge.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great market test. And yeah, you may have to spend a little bit of time and money, but so is the way of business, I think. And I think there's momentum involved with that, right? You actually get stuff done, you put stuff out there, and it gives you some momentum forward rather than constantly just talking about it. And then I also think there's probably another second biggest mistake people fall into, and that's just getting discouraged when they run into a problem they can't solve immediately. I used to be in high school, I used to be like a whiz, and then I got to college and that all changed, and I was not a whiz. I didn't know what was going on, and I had to learn, hey, sometimes you have to study, sometimes you can't immediately solve whatever problem you're looking at because it's not high school algebra anymore. And I think that happens a lot with new people trying out 3D modeling too, especially when we're self-taught. I'm self-taught 3D modeler as well, and it's complicated. These problems are complex, and if you don't know how to use the tool, like I use Onshape for when I'm designing CAD related
Yeah.
stuff,
That's what I was going to
and
ask you.
yeah, and sometimes it can be discouraging when you just can't figure out how to make it work. It just won't work, and I just encourage people to maybe take a break.
Yeah.
I'll take a break if it's a really hard problem. I'll take a break and come back to it the next day.
So if people want to be able to find your megafig files, do you license them? Do you have a Patreon? Like, how do you run your business on the back end in terms of other 3D printers if they were interested in selling your stuff?
Oh yeah. So I actually I started a Coles 3D page, and that's really where you can find the commercial files to my files. I'm currently asking $100 for a lifetime license for each of my
Okay.
files, and you'll get the file. I've given you information about the cost breakdown, which filaments I use, some of the general settings that I've put in there just to help people be successful. And I'm trying out a new technique, and we'll see. I think this may be a little new to the 3D printing world, but as I mentioned previously, my prints take a lot longer than other people's. For instance, each one of my models takes about 17 hours of print time. And so
Wow.
they're time intensive, and not everybody has 25 printers like I do. And I figured, yeah, let me try this out and see how people like it. And for maybe anybody who can't necessarily afford $100 a file up front, if anybody wanted to reach out to me by email or on Colts 3D, I'd be more than happy to sell them megafigs at wholesale pricing they could take them to their craft fairs, try them out, see how they do, and maybe there's a little bit less of an upfront risk to them, and they can utilize my printer capacity for the time being. And I said, hey, why don't we try it out? I know that's how other businesses do it, so
Yeah.
maybe some small 3D print shops could benefit from that. And so that's something I'm trying out.
I actually think that's a really great solution there. I'll make sure that I put your links down in the description so that people are able to go and check out all of your files. I just want to thank you so much for reaching out to me to arrange this interview in the first place. I think it's so important for people to hear other people's perspectives when it comes to designing and building businesses. And you have 25 printers. Like, obviously, you're doing something right. It's working out for you right now. And a lot of times what you hear in 3D printing is it's saturated, and I don't agree with that. I think there is a space for everybody. I think that if you build your business on solid foundation and you do things the right way, that there is room for everybody. And, somebody like you show that. So thanks so much for taking the time to do this with me. I think it's been great. And I hope that people find it really helpful.
I really appreciate you having me. Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
I hope you all found that to be really helpful. I know I definitely learned a couple things from him. Leave a comment below, something that you learned. Are you currently working on building your own 3D models? And make sure that you're subscribed so that you continue to get alerted to my videos if you are trying to grow your own 3D printing business. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy printing!